Welcome back, dear viewers, to yet another enthralling journey into the world of mystery. I'm Utopara, the storyteller. In the pages of history, some stories echo louder than others, reverberating across the corridors of time. Tonight, we embark on a poignant journey, one that unfolds in the heart of the North Atlantic, beneath the moonless sky and within the icy depths below. The RMS Titanic, a name etched in gold in the collective memory of humanity. A ship that sailed not just across the Atlantic but into the realms of legend and lore. As we delve into the Titanic chronicles, we unravel the layers of a tale that encompasses the grandeur of an era and the tragedy that shook the world. And I invite you to join me on this odyssey, a journey through love, ambition, and the unforgiving embrace of the sea. Together, let's explore the Titanic, not merely as a ship but as a floating city of dreams that sets sail into the pages of eternity. Tonight, we unlock the vault of time, opening the chapters of an epic that culminated in the voyage of the Titanic. Welcome to the Titanic's fateful journey. Our voyage begins now. Chapter 1. The Gilded Age, and the Birth of Titanic. In the early 1900s, the world was caught in the ebb and flow of change. The Gilded Age, a tapestry woven with threads of progress, opulence, and societal transformation. Amidst the tapestry of time, the dawn of a new age painted the world in hues of ambition. Nations building, societies evolving, a symphony of progress played out against the backdrop of an ever-changing world. Cities flourished, and dreams soared. Skyscrapers pierced the heavens, and factories hummed with the promise of a new industrial dawn. It was an age of innovation, of unbridled ambition. In the shipyards, where sparks danced and hammers sang, colossal dreams took shape. Visionaries and craftsmen birthed an icon, a vessel that would come to symbolize the aspirations of an epic. The RMS Titanic, a floating marvel of steel, dreams, and destiny, a symbol of progress and an ambitious venture that would redefine luxury on the high seas. In the Gilded Age, the Titanic embodied the pinnacle of engineering, luxury, and human achievement. The Titanic was one of the largest and most opulent ships in the world. It had a gross registered tonnage of 46,328 tons, and when fully laden, the ship weighed more than 52,000 tons. The Titanic was approximately 882.5 feet, aka 269 meters long, and about 92.5 feet, aka 28.2 meters wide at its widest point. As to safety elements, the Titanic had 16 compartments that included doors, which could be closed from the bridge, so that water could be contained in the event the hull was breached. Although they were presumed to be watertight, the bulkheads were not capped at the top. The ship's builders claimed that 4 of the compartments could be flooded without endangering the liner's buoyancy. The system led many to claim that the Titanic was unsinkable. As the keel was laid, and the rivets secured, the world awaited a vessel that would set a new standard in maritime history. Finally, on that fateful day in Belfast, Ireland, the Titanic set sail for the first time. Beneath the infinite canvas of the open sky, where the horizon meets eternity, lies the North Atlantic. A realm of mystery and majesty, where the whispers of the past echo through the waves. A voyage that would etch its tale into the annals of time, a tale of tragedy that lies beneath the waves. Welcome to the Odyssey of the Titanic, where dreams set sail, and echoes resound across eternity. Chapter 2. The Notable Passengers. As the Titanic prepared for her maiden voyage, she became a vessel not only of steel and grandeur, but a vessel carrying the hopes and dreams of a diverse tapestry of passengers. From the opulence of first class to the humble cabins below, the Titanic was a floating cross-section of society, people from different backgrounds, cultures, and aspirations. There were several notable figures among the first-class passengers on the Titanic. Jacob Astor, IV, a prominent American businessman, investor, real estate tycoon, and heir to the Astor family fortune, who had made waves a year earlier by marrying 18-year-old Madeline Talmadge Force, a young woman 29 years his junior, shortly after divorcing his first wife. He was not only the wealthiest passenger, but also one of the wealthiest individuals of his time, and played a significant role in the development of luxury hotels and resorts. Benjamin Guggenheim, an American businessman and heir to the Guggenheim family fortune, accompanied by his mistress, valet and chauffeur, Isidore Straus, a co-owner of Macy's department store, and he and his wife Ida were well-known philanthropists. Absent was financier J.P. Morgan, whose International Mercantile Marine Shipping Trust controlled the White Star Line, which operated the Titanic, and who had selected Ismay as a company officer. Morgan had planned to join his associates on Titanic but cancelled at the last minute when some business matters delayed him. Chapter 3. The Titanic's Maiden Voyage. Titanic's maiden voyage was intended to be the first of many transatlantic crossings between Southampton and New York, via Cherbourg and Queenstown on westbound runs, returning via Plymouth in England while eastbound. April 10, 1912, a date etched in time as the Titanic embarked on her maiden voyage. On April 10, 1912, the Titanic set sail on its maiden voyage, traveling from Southampton, England, to New York City, from 9:30 a.m. until 11:30 a.m. Passengers began boarding the ship. At around noon, the Titanic left the dock at Southampton for its maiden voyage. The ship's captain, Edward J. Smith, was also known as the Millionaire's Captain, as he was famous for ferrying around very well-off travelers. The sea stretched endlessly before her, and the air was filled with a sense of anticipation, adventure, and an unwavering belief in the ship's unsinkability. As the ship set sail, a myriad of emotions filled the air. The Titanic, more than a vessel, became a stage where the human experience unfolded in all its complexity. 6:30 p.m. The Titanic arrived at its first stop in Cherbourg, France. 8:10 p.m. The ship left Cherbourg to head for Queenstown, Ireland, carrying over 2,000 passengers and crew. The 11th of April 1912. 1:30 p.m. The Titanic left Queenstown and set off on its journey across the Atlantic for New York. 12th and the 13th of April 1912. The Titanic was at sea, continuing on its journey as passengers enjoyed the many luxuries the ship has to offer. First-class passengers reveled in the splendor of the ship's amenities, while third-class passengers found solace in the camaraderie and shared experiences. Below the decks, a dedicated crew worked tirelessly to ensure the smooth operation of the Titanic. From the engine room to the navigation bridge, each member played a vital role in the success of the maiden voyage. Amidst the grandeur, passengers engaged in various leisure activities. Promenading on the deck, playing deck games, every moment was a glimpse into a world of luxury and refinement. The voyage across the Atlantic, bound for New York, was not just a journey. It was an event, a symbol of progress, and a testament to human ingenuity. Chapter 4. Whispers of Doom. As the Titanic gracefully sailed through the calm waters of the North Atlantic, little did the passengers know that beneath the veneer of opulence, whispers of doom were beginning to circulate, a haunting prelude to a tragedy that would soon unfold. Sunday, the 14th of April 1912. At 9 a.m. Senior wireless operator Jack Phillips started to receive warnings of icebergs from other vessels. The first warning of the day came from the liner Caronia, which had spotted icebergs and growlers, subtle whispers of the dangers that lurked in the icy waters. At 10:15 a.m. Captain Edward John Smith was given the first telegraph warning of icebergs. At 11 a.m. the scheduled time of the first lifeboat drill, which was cancelled by Captain Smith without explanation. At 5:50 p.m. After receiving iceberg warnings throughout the day, Captain Smith changed the Titanic's course, heading slightly south. However, the ship's speed was not lowered, but continued to steam at full speed, which was standard practice at the time. This change should have directed the Titanic into an area of the Gulf Stream that would be free of icebergs. In any normal year, this would be the case, but 1912 was not a normal year for ice. Cold water had pushed the warm Gulf Stream further south, and the change in direction actually put the ship on a collision course with destiny that would unfold in the dark hours of the North Atlantic. At 7:20 p.m., Assistant Wireless Operator Harold Bride finished work on the accounts, and finally picked up the ice warning from the SS Californian, warning of 3 large icebergs. When Bride took the telegram to the bridge, Captain Smith had already left to dine with passengers. The telegram was passed to another officer instead, although none of the surviving officers recalled seeing the message. 9:20 p.m. The Titanic's captain, Edward Smith, retired to his room. 9:40 p.m. Phillips received the 5th ice warning, from the SS Mesaba, warning of a great number of large icebergs and field ice just 15 miles ahead of the Titanic. Because the message was not prefixed with MSG, aka Master Service Gram, the signifier that the communique was intended for the captain, Phillips treated it as non-urgent, failed to pass the message on, and returned to the busy task of sending passengers personal telegrams. There was a 2-hour window to send passenger telegrams via the Cape Race receiver on Newfoundland, Canada. At 10:20 p.m., Californian encountered a large ice field, and Captain Lord decided to stop the ship and wait until morning before proceeding further. Lord asked Evans if he knew of any ships in the area, and Evans responded, "Only the Titanic." Lord asked Evans to inform her that Californian was stopped and surrounded by ice. Lord ordered Evans to warn all other ships in the area, which he did. Around 10:55 p.m., Titanic's on-duty wireless operator, Jack Phillips, was busy clearing a backlog of passengers' messages with the wireless station at Cape Race, Newfoundland, 800 miles, aka 1,300 kilometers away, at the time. Evans's message that SS Californian was stopped and surrounded by ice was heard very strongly on Titanic due to the relative proximity of the two ships, and drowned out a separate message Phillips had been in the process of receiving from Cape Race, bringing Phillips to rebuke Evans.
Shut up, shut up. I am busy. I am working Cape Race.
Phillips never passed this message to the bridge, but in his defense, Evans had not prefixed the message with the letters, MSG. Meanwhile, unbeknown to First Officer Murdoch who took over the bridge, the iceberg lay just 15 miles ahead. Whilst Titanic continued at a high speed of 22 knots, aka 41 km per hour, aka 25 miles per hour. A little bit later, Evans, feeling that he had done his duty despite Phillips's rude rejection of the message, switched off his wireless equipment and went to bed. Although icebergs warnings, which were crucial messages, were sent by other ships, but the prevailing confidence in the Titanic's invincibility persisted. Chapter 5. The Tragic Night. The night of April 14, 1912, a night that would etch itself into the annals of history, as the tragic climax of the Titanic's maiden voyage. The air was crisp, the sea tranquil without moonlight, and the ship glided through the darkness, unaware of the impending catastrophe. On board, the passengers reveled in the opulence of the ship. Some strolled on the deck, enjoying the cool night breeze, while others gathered in the luxurious lounges, wrapped in a sense of security. But most of the Titanic's passengers had retired to their rooms for the evening. On the bridge, the crew diligently kept watch. The night was calm, the sea seemingly benevolent. However, in the vast darkness, unseen dangers lurked, waiting to reveal themselves. Two lookouts, Frederick Fleet and Reginald Lee, were stationed high above the decks in the crow's nest of the Titanic, scanning the horizon. The lookouts strained against the cold night, peering into the darkness for any sign of danger. But their task was made difficult by the fact that the ocean was unusually calm that night. Because there would be little water breaking at its base, an iceberg would be more difficult to spot. In addition, the crow's nest's binoculars were missing. The binoculars were stashed in a locker in the crow's nest, but the key to the locker wasn't on board. That's because a sailor named David Blair, who was reassigned to another ship at the last minute, forgot to leave the key behind when he left. The key was in Blair's pocket. At approximately 11:40 p.m., 45 minutes after the last warning, ship lookout Frederick Fleet spotted an iceberg directly in the Titanic's path. Then, in a heartbeat, the tranquility shattered. Action was taken immediately. The warning bell rang clear, and a call was made to the pilot house, where the ship was commanded from. The call echoed through the ship.
Iceberg, right ahead.
The atmosphere transformed from one of celebration to one of panic. First Officer William Murdoch ordered both the ship hard a starboard. A maneuver, that under the order system then in place, would turn the ship to port, aka, left, and the engines reversed. The Titanic began to turn, but it was too close to avoid a collision. Despite the crew's frantic efforts, the ship's starboard side scraped along the iceberg. A silent encounter beneath the starry night sky that sent shockwaves through the ship. Only 37 seconds passed between the sighting of the iceberg and hitting it. Initially, there seemed to be no reason for alarm, as the ship merely grazed past the iceberg. However, this seemingly harmless graze had created a 300-foot tear in the hull of the ship. Many passengers and crew slept through the collision whilst many others, including Lookout Man Fleet, assumed the ship had survived a glancing blow and was undamaged. The Titanic's captain, Edward Smith, along with the ship's architect, Thomas Andrews, went down to inspect the area where the ship had been hit. By the time they got there, 5 of the Titanic's compartments were already filling up with water at an alarming rate. After quickly assessing the damage, Andrews estimated that, as the ship's forward compartments were filled with water to a level of 14 feet, aka 4.27 meters high, its bow would drop deeper into the ocean, causing water from the ruptured compartments to spill over into each succeeding compartment, thereby sealing the ship's fate just under 2 hours. The Titanic would founder. At that point, any hope of saving the ship was gone. By reversing the engines, Murdoch actually caused the Titanic to turn slower than if it had been moving at its original speed. Most experts believe the ship would have survived if it had hit the iceberg head-on. The 15th of April 1912, 12 a.m. Captain Smith, who learned the ship could stay afloat for only 2 more hours, instructed his wireless operator to make the first radio calls for help, and ordered the crew to prepare the lifeboats, and get the passengers and crew up on deck. Immediately, the crew went into panic mode. Phillips began sending distress signals, one of which reached the Carpathia at approximately 12:20 a.m. on April 15, and the Cunard ship immediately headed toward the stricken liner. However, the Carpathia was some 58 nautical miles, aka 107 kilometers away when it received the signal, and it would take more than 3 hours to reach the Titanic. Other ships also responded, including the Olympic, but all were too far away. A vessel, the Californian, which was the last to have been in contact before the collision, was spotted nearby, but unable to contact it because its wireless had been turned off for the night, and the wireless officer was by now off duty. As the reality of the situation unfolded, the crew initiated the evacuation. The passengers, now jolted from their reverie, faced the unimaginable. The once unsinkable ship now bore the scars of a collision, and the impending tragedy unfolded in the cramped corridors and grand halls alike. 12:45 a.m. A little more than an hour after contact with the iceberg, a largely disorganized and haphazard evacuation began with the lowering the first lifeboat into the freezing water. The craft was designed to hold 65 people. It left with only 28 aboard. During the confusion and chaos hours, people tried to clamber from all angles to secure a passage to safety. The first of 8 emergency distress rockets was fired. It would appear that the rockets sent up by Titanic were observed from the deck of the Californian. However, they were not interpreted as distress rockets, and in retrospect, the actions taken in response to them were woefully inadequate. By 1 a.m., water was seen at the base, deck of the grand staircase. Amid the growing panic, several male passengers tried to board lifeboat number 14, causing 5th Officer Harold Lowe to fire his gun 3 times. Around this time, Phillips's distress calls reflected a growing desperation, as one noted that, "The ship cannot last much longer." The crew had not been trained adequately in carrying out an evacuation. The officers did not know how many they could safely put aboard the lifeboats, and launched well below capacity. Some with only a handful of passengers because crewmen worried that the davits would not be able to support the weight of a fully loaded boat. The Titanic had cancelled its scheduled lifeboat drill earlier in the day, and the crew was unaware that the davits had been tested in Belfast, the birthplace of the ship. In accordance with accepted practices of the time, as ships were seen as largely unsinkable, and lifeboats were intended to transfer passengers to nearby rescue vessels, not to hold everyone on board simultaneously. This meant there was only room in the lifeboats for about half the passengers and crew on board. Although the Titanic's number of lifeboats exceeded that required by the British Board of Trade, its 20 boats could carry only 1,178 people of the more than 2,200 people on board, far short of the total number of passengers. If the ship had carried her full complement of about 3,339 passengers and crew, only about a third could have been accommodated in the lifeboats. Most of the passengers on the lifeboats were women and children, following the maritime tradition of women and children being the first to be offered rescue. Only when there were no women or children nearby, were men permitted to board. Some crew were sent with these lifeboats to help row. As passengers waited to enter lifeboats, they were entertained by the Titanic's musicians, who initially played in the first-class lounge before eventually moving to the ship's deck. Sources differ on how long they performed, some reporting that it was until shortly before the ship sank. None of the musicians survived the sinking. Hundreds of human dramas unfolded between the order to load the lifeboats and the ship's final plunge. Men saw off wives and children, families were separated in the confusion, and selfless individuals gave up their spots to remain with loved ones, or allow a more vulnerable passenger to escape. Third-class passengers were largely left to fend for themselves, causing many of them to become trapped below decks as the ship was filled with water. As the last of the lifeboats were filled, a few male passengers, and senior officers were given spaces, or took them in the panic. Amidst the chaos, the crew, passengers, each facing the encroaching darkness, sought a lifeline, a chance at survival in the unforgiving sea. 2:05 a.m. The only lifeboats that remained on the ship were 3 collapsible boats. Between 2:10 and 2:15 a.m., a little over 2.5 hours after Titanic struck the iceberg, her rate of sinking suddenly increased as the boat deck dipped underwater, and the sea poured in through open hatches and grates. As her unsupported stern rose out of the water, exposing the propellers, placing incredible strain on the midsection, Smith released the crew, saying that,
"It's every man for himself."
He was reportedly last seen in the bridge, and his body was never found. At approximately 2:18 a.m., the last radio message was sent. The lights on the Titanic went out, plunging the ship into darkness. As the Titanic's bow continues to sink, the stern rises higher out of the water, placing great strain on the midsection, and the ship breaks in half between the third and fourth funnels, due to the immense forces on the keel. Reports later speculated that it took some 6 minutes for that section, likely traveling at approximately 30 miles, aka 48 kilometers per hour, to reach the ocean bottom. The stern momentarily settled back in the water before rising again, eventually becoming vertical with hundreds of people still clinging to it. It briefly remained in that position before beginning its final plunge. At 2:20 a.m. under the starlit sky, the Titanic succumbed to the icy depths as the stern also disappeared beneath the Atlantic. The Titanic's voyage comes to a tragic end. A tragedy that would resonate across time, leaving in its wake stories of loss, courage, and the fragility of human ambition. Exceeding Andrew's prediction, Titanic stubbornly stayed afloat for close to 3 hours. Those hours witnessed acts of craven cowardice and extraordinary bravery. It was believed that the Titanic sank in one piece, but the discovery of the wreck many years later revealed that she had broken in two. All remaining passengers and crew were immersed in freezing cold icy water at a temperature of -2 Celsius, aka 28 Fahrenheit. Almost all of those in the water died of cardiac arrest or other bodily reactions to freezing cold water within 15 to 30 minutes. The occupants of the lifeboats were struck with terror as they heard a cacophony of human emotions: fear, despair, and agony. It felt as though a colossal sea monster was ruthlessly claiming its victims. The noise of the people in the water screaming, yelling, and crying was a tremendous shock to the occupants of the lifeboats. As an occupant in a lifeboat later wrote, "The cries came as a thunderbolt, unexpected, inconceivable, incredible. No one in any of the boats standing off a few hundred yards away can have escaped the paralyzing shock of knowing that, so short a distance away, a tragedy, unbelievable in its magnitude, was being enacted, which we, helpless, could in no way avert or diminish." Those in the lifeboats observed the unfolding tragedy before them, a live event of sorrow and despair. Despite witnessing the distressing scene, they hesitated to offer assistance, wary that they themselves could become the next victims. Fearful of being swamped, those in the lifeboats delayed returning to pick up survivors. By the time they rowed back, almost all the people in the water had died from exposure. Only 5 who were in the water were helped into the lifeboats, though the lifeboats had room for almost 500 more people. The ship's most illustrious passengers each responded to the circumstances with conduct that has become an integral part of the Titanic legend. Ismay, the White Star managing director, helped load some of the boats and later stepped onto a collapsible as it was being lowered. Although he insisted no women or children were in the vicinity when he abandoned ship, he would never live down the ignominy of surviving the disaster while so many others perished. Thomas Andrews, Titanic's chief designer, was last seen in the first-class smoking room, staring blankly at a painting of a ship on the wall. Astor deposited his wife Madeline into a lifeboat, and remarking that she was pregnant, asked if he could accompany her. Refused entry. He managed to kiss her goodbye just before the boat was lowered away. Isidor Straus was offered a seat on account of his age, but he refused any special consideration, and his wife Ida would not leave her husband behind. The couple retired to their cabin and perished together. Benjamin Guggenheim and his valet returned to their rooms and changed into formal evening dress, emerging onto the deck. He famously declared, "We are dressed in our best and are prepared to go down like gentlemen." Molly Brown helped load the boats and finally was forced into one of the last to leave. She implored its crewmen to turn back for survivors, but they refused, fearing they would be swamped by desperate people trying to escape the icy seas. At around 3:30 in the morning, a British passenger liner, Cunard's Carpathia, was the first to arrive at the scene. Firing rockets after receiving Titanic's distress call at midnight, and steaming at full speed while dodging ice floes all night. Which was over an hour after the Titanic sank. At 4:10 a.m. Over the next several hours, the Carpathia picked up all 705 survivors from the ship's lifeboats. White Star chairman, Ismay, wrote a message to be sent to the White Star Line's offices. "Deeply regret advise you Titanic sank this morning. 15th after collision iceberg, resulting serious loss life. Further particulars later." At 5:30 a.m. The Californian was finally alerted to the disaster by the Frankfurt, and made haste to the scene. At approximately 8:30 a.m., the Californian arrived, having heard the news some 3 hours earlier. Shortly before 9 a.m., the Carpathia headed for New York City, with 705 survivors on board, where it arrived to massive crowds on April 18 while 1,517 people died. Carpathia's captain, Arthur Rostron, described the place as an icefield that had included 20 large bergs, measuring up to 200 feet, aka 61 meters high, and numerous smaller bergs, as well as ice floes and debris from Titanic. Passengers described being in the middle of a vast white plain of ice, studded with icebergs. This area is now known as Iceberg Alley.